If you're playing daily fantasy sports and you aren't thinking about game selection, you're going to lose your money. In this video, I'm going to explain why game selection matters and provide you with a blueprint on how to use it to win in DFS. Even if I'm the fourth best DFS player in the entire world, if I get into a four-person contest with the top three players, I'm drawing dead to win in the long run. The whole goal is to play against people not working as hard as us, not playing as smart as us, simply not as good as us. I'll share with you 7 tips on how to find those soft DFS games. Spliced in throughout each tip are snippets from an interview I did with DFS legend Youdacao on the Establish the Run podcast. Yuda is undoubtedly one of the greatest DFS players of all time, and his expertise and experience is perfect for added context to each point. Number 7, seek out off-brand contests. Yes, NFL and NBA DFS main slate are incredibly fun and popular games, but they're also the most covered. The most information is easily available about them. The most study has gone into beating them for DFS. The softest games will often be in smaller sports, tennis, NASCAR, XFL, soccer. If you've dedicated your life to studying something like WNBA, you follow every rotation, you're stalking the player's Instagram for injury news, you know all the playoff rest implications, the edge there is going to be huge. Yes, the amount of money you can win is smaller, but the ROI expectation is way, way higher. Youdacao explains how this has worked for him and how it made baseball his best DFS sport.
My best sport, MLB, there is an edge to having my own knowledge when it comes to that. I think I just have somewhat better projections. And if you actually look across the industry when it comes to MLB projections, there's no real agreement, which is actually super rare among sites that do offer projections within, say, NBA or NFL. You never have a player projected for something greater than even 10% of their whatever their projection is, versus where in MLB, there could be such a wide range. And that alone, I think, is a sign that the systems aren't very good. And there's just people heavily leaning on like elementary things that it's almost detrimental to play into those types of things.
There's also softer games in things like second half DFS, snake drafts, things that are just hard to scale for some of the best players. And the same can be said for off-brand sites. Because DraftKings and FanDuel have the most liquidity, that's where all the best players play. There are a bunch of other sites where the data on what it takes to win isn't as clear, and there are much weaker players. Tip number 6, play the smallest stakes games you possibly can. If I want to get $100 in play on an NFL Sunday, the temptation is to play one $100 contest, or maybe two $50 contests. However, that is flat out suboptimal. The weakest players are often at the lowest stakes. If you have access to beginner contests, be sure to exhaust those. If you don't, still stay below that $5 level, as highly experienced players are not allowed to play those stakes. So for my $100, I would enter 100 different $1 contests, even if I'm using the same lineup in all 100 of them. If Yuda had to start over today with a $1,000 bankroll, what sports game stakes would he play?
I think I would just join the lowest stakes possible, not even bother with anything sexy like $20 Milli Maker even. Play things that are beginner cash games, or just like these. There's a lot of like non-guaranteed prize pools you could play for $2, $5, where you'd be playing pretty soft competition. If you really wanted to grind your way, you could probably do well with those.
Number 5, play cash games and include head-to-heads as a big part of your cash game portfolio. Winning at cash games, aka any contest in which roughly 50% of the field gets paid out, helps to balance out the extreme variance that comes with playing top-heavy DFS tournaments. And playing cash honestly helps us become a better tournament player because it forces us to understand the best/most popular plays and why they're so strong. How much of your time is focused on cash versus GPP?
The two processes do go hand in hand. In order to be able to properly go against the grain in GPPs on certain plays, you actually have to know why those plays are good to begin with. Cash, you're evaluating everything from every angle. You're understanding what makes it a high upside situation, why it's a high floor, the nuances of how it could be fragile, how it could fail versus situations where it does well. You just have a much better understanding, and combined with how you would think about the rest of your lineup, it's pretty important in the context of a GPP, which really does take much more thought to it. But playing cash gives me a higher basis of understanding the projections of basically everyone.
So soft head-to-heads are some of the best cash game action we can possibly find. Our opponents can make a ton of mistakes that really and quickly reduces their win expectation. So we want to post a lot of head-to-heads below that $5 range. And if you find the strong player is scooping a lot of the head-to-heads that you post, use the block feature on DraftKings to stop them from doing so.
Give me everything.
A corner!
ambulance, but not for me.
Number 4, find flat payout tournaments. Once we get a lineup into the top 1% of a field, there's an incredible amount of volatility. Actually, winning a tournament is extremely hard, even with a very, very, very good team. That's why those $1 million to first, $100K to second tournaments are so hard on our bankroll. If we never actually hit that first place prize, we are going to bleed money.
So in the past calendar year, I've won a bunch of milli makers, but in the previous calendar year, I was second in like 5 of them. So whether or not you end up winning those is essentially the difference between a mediocre and great year sometimes. Right. And all it takes is 1 or 2 over the course of 365.
So we should be seeking out tournaments where 10th place is 10% of first. If first is 100K, 10th would be 10K. We also want the min cash to ideally be double the buy-in. If the buy-in is $100, the last cashing position should be worth $200. These structures are far better for our bankroll.
Nowadays, the prize pools will be like very top heavy. You'll have like $1 million to first and like 200K to second. So you actually have to maximize your outcomes of like getting that super outlier result much more than you had to do in the past, where because in aggregate, the projections weren't as good, you could just play better projections and just over time, you'll see success. But it's really, in my eyes, not how it is anymore.
Tip number 3, only play single entry cash contests. For cash games such as 50-50s and double ups, we only want to be in contests where each user can submit just 1 entry. And on top of that, we want to play the largest field contest possible in that specific format. The problem with playing those multi-entry double ups is that the lineups submitted are heavily weighted towards users playing 150 of the same team. The people doing this are typically some of the best players on the site. They will not be making a ton of mistakes. But if we play in a 10,000 entry single entry double up, well, we know that there aren't 10,000 very good cash players on the site. That is going to be a very, very beatable game.
Anytime you see a optimal lineup from ETR, it will be trained in some form, either in high stakes cash or just the double ups in general. ETR, you really, if you're just going to play NFL and you had 5 hours, is a pretty good resource. Get on top of everything.
ETR, shout out to us. Number 2, be Rake conscious. Rake, of course, is the fee that the operating platforms such as DraftKings and FanDuel charge to run the contest. In other words, it's the amount of money removed from the total prize pool. And it is a wildly, wildly important number, as the rake can turn a winning player into a losing player. Some contests, such as small buy-in large field tournaments, can have rake as high as 16%. That is a very difficult number to overcome. We want to find games closer to that 10% rake range. And this is often found in slightly higher buy-in contests and single or 3 max entry games. That coveted 10 to 11% rake is also found in a lot of cash games that we need to find. And what do you think a good or realistic ROI is now for a very good pro?
Best pro is 5%. If you can consistently touch 10, that's basically amazing. There's also factors of diminishing returns for sure. If you were playing lower stakes, even now, if I were to play low stakes, I could probably see 50%.
And tip number 1, register for contests as close to lock as possible. If a slate starts at 1 p.m. Eastern, the best action can be found from noon on, that final hour. Yes, the contests are smaller, but that's the time most casual DFS players are submitting entries. It's also the time most professionals and serious players are tweaking their lineups. They're not registering for contests. So the people we are likeliest to go against close to lock, they just rolled out of bed, they're shaking off their hangover, they're sitting on the toilet making some lineups, they're a mess. Meanwhile, we've been awake since 7 a.m. We're grinding all the news, we're grinding all the projections. We are ready. And that gives us a big, big edge.
As far as actual physical hours, for NFL, I won't even touch anything until Friday morning. I won't even start projecting until Saturday, and I spend my whole Saturday doing NFL. Sometimes it'll be an all-nighter or something like that. Sunday, I'll be up at like 6 a.m. just building, because that's just how long it takes. Pump out 150 lineups.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more. If you want to know exactly how I'd play a $100 bankroll, check the link in the description for a free article I wrote.